Barry Gibb did not begin in velvet seats and spotlights. He began in a rented room where coins were counted at the kitchen table, and a young mother prayed the pot would stretch one more night. September 1st, 1946, Isle of Man. No silver spoon, just a drummer father named Hugh coming home at dawn with sore hands and empty pockets, and a mother, Barbra, who could hold a family together with nothing but tea, tenderness, and sheer will. Before the world called him sir, life called him to survive. At 2 years old, he shouldn't have lived. A teapot tipped, boiling water fell, and a house became a battlefield. Doctors at Noble's Hospital whispered 20 minutes. His mother burned her own hands trying to tear away the steaming clothes. His father ran the streets like a soldier with a wounded boy in his arms. He came home mapped in scars, raised ridges across a tiny chest and arms that would never forget. But the miracle had a melody. A father drummed softly at his bedside. A sister, Leslie, brought toys. Love stitched what fire tried to erase. Then came a different shadow. 4 years old. Words no child should hear from a stranger. Fear that required policemen, and questions that stuck like burrs in the mind. He said later he was never physically harmed. But the shame, the confusion, those leave marks you can't see. So the family moved and moved again. Chapel House, St. Catherine's Drive, Snell Road, Manchester. Not homeless, just never settled. And in that instability, a boy discovered the one thing that never shifted: sound. Hugh's drums rattled the walls. Barry hummed melodies like prayers. With twins Robin and Maurice, the singing began around the table. 3 boys in a cramped house, weaving harmony out of hunger. By 1957, he was 11 and already leading his brothers on a tiny stage with a big name, the Rattlesnakes. They sang Buddy Holly and Everly Brothers tunes to win bread, not headlines. When Barry's guitar split clean through one night, hope cracking with it, they reformed anyway, grit in their teeth and rhythm in their bones. And then the greatest leap. August 1958, the Gibb family boarded the Fairseas under assisted migration. Bound for Australia with suitcases that rattled like tin cans. No golden welcome, just dust, heat, and a speedway in Redcliffe, where the boys sang between car races with petrol in their lungs and courage in their throats. People turned. People listened. Survival set to 3-part harmony. By 15, Barry made a hard man's choice: leave school or leave food off the table. He chose music. He filled notebooks while other boys filled exam sheets. A contract with Festival Records came. Dismissals came, too. But a pen that refused to quit began cutting through. In 1966, I Was a Lover, a Leader of Men won a songwriting award. Small trophy, massive message. The boy with burns and a backbone had a voice no one could ignore. 1967, London called. Robert Stigwood listened. The Bee Gees arrived, not as rumors, but as a reckoning. New York mining disaster 1941 ghosted up the charts with a melody people swore must be the Beatles. Then Massachusetts. To Love Somebody. Words. That wasn't pop. Those were prayers wrapped in vinyl. Crowds screamed, but behind the applause, the machine ground hard. Fatigue hollowed the brothers. Pride flared. When 1st of May was chosen over Robin's cherished lamplight, he walked. Families are forged in love and tested by comparison. Barry tried to go it alone. He released I'll Kiss Your Memory. It didn't land. They found their way back like brothers do when blood speaks louder than ego. Out of that uneasy truce came Lonely Days and How Can You Mend a Broken Heart. Songs that sound like they were written on the floor of a chapel, Because spiritually, they were. They learned what every family learns the hard way. The same gift that binds you can cut you if you forget why it matters. Then, Miami, 1974. Arif Mardin in the booth. A rehearsal. A scream that turned into a note. A note that turned into identity. The falsetto wasn't a gimmick. It was a resurrection. Jive Talkin'. Nights on Broadway. You Should Be Dancing. And then The Flood. Saturday Night Fever. 40 million copies of a soundtrack that soaked dance floors and living rooms with the same electricity. Stayin' Alive. Night Fever. How Deep Is Your Love? For a while, Barry Gibb's voice was the air. He wrote for others too. Barbra Streisand's Woman in Love, Dionne Warwick's Heartbreaker, Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton's Islands in the Stream. He was a fountain, and the world was thirsty. But the same stadiums that raise you will turn if the wind shifts. The disco backlash came with fists. Records smashed in ballparks, DJs sneering, the falsetto mocked as if it hadn't just carried a generation. They released Living Eyes, stripped and earnest. The public looked away. Imagine pouring your scars into songs and watching the crowd that danced with you the night before light a match under your name. Barry swallowed that betrayal like a stone and kept writing anyway. Less visible, just as lethal. And then the blow no chart prepares you for. March 10th, 1988. Andy Gibb, 12 years younger, a baby brother who felt almost like a son, gone at 30. A velvet voice, a sweet face, hits like I Just Want to Be Your Everything and Shadow Dancing, and a spiral Barry tried to arrest with phone calls, sessions, rehab, prayer. The doctor said myocarditis, but the truth was written in the years of abuse that softened a strong heart. Funerals are theaters of honesty. The parents broke. The twins stiffened in helpless grief. The eldest brother, the leader, the arranger, the anchor, couldn't find a note. He later admitted a sentence that every grown man should memorize. It doesn't matter how many people love you if you don't love yourself. That line wasn't philosophy. In 1992, the first rhythm the family ever knew fell silent. Hugh Gibb, the drummer who kept food on the table with calloused hands, passed. There are two kinds of loss, a fallen star and a fallen foundation. Barry had now felt both. January 2003. Maurice walks into a Miami hospital with stomach pain. Routine, they thought. It wasn't. A blockage. Surgery. A heart that wouldn't restart. 53 years old. If Barry was fire and Robin was storm. Maurice was ground, glue, laughter, ballast in one night. The chemistry that made that shimmering blend simply ceased to exist. Barry kept replaying the sequence. Barry held his hand and hummed, How Deep Is Your Love, hoping to catch a harmony. On May 20th, 2012, the harmony ended. Fans lined streets with vinyl like rosaries. Inside, I Started a Joke floated over a coffin, as if the song had always been a warning. Their mother, Barbara, clutched photos of her boys, the way mothers hold the past, when the present is merciless. It was the third child she buried. Barry walked out into a world that suddenly had no echo. The last man standing, the newspapers called him. To him, it sounded like a sentence. He had known failure. He had known hatred. Now he knew absence. And if you listen closely to the interviews that came later, you hear the confession of every man who's carried too much. The arthritis that turned hands into aching maps. The canceled tour in 1994 that felt like humiliation. The hospital scare with his own intestines. The terror of going the way Maurice did. the falsetto that once leapt to the rafters, now shaking mid-phrase. He thought about stopping. He stared at guitars on the wall like they were ghosts. What stopped him from stopping? A Scottish beauty queen he married in 1970 and never let go. Linda Gray. She raised 5 children while he fought fame and fatigue. She drew hard lines when temptation knocked. Not in this house, he told the poisons that killed his brother. He'll tell you himself. She saved his life. When he came home from Robin's funeral and sat in a room too quiet to breathe, Linda wrapped her arms around a knight and reminded him of something nobler than titles. You are not alone. Before Linda, there was a first marriage, Maureen Bates in 1966. 2 good young people, too young to carry the weight of world tours and magazine covers and absence. It ended in 1970 without scandal. Just a sorrow that taught him a lesson he never forgot. Time moved the way it always does, steady for the calendar, brutal for the heart. Miami became sanctuary. North Bay Road, Biscayne Bay out the glass, guitars along the walls like a small museum of miracles. Rolls-Royce and Bentley in the garage sit beside the humbler trophies, platinum records that tell you he sold not tens, but hundreds of millions. The catalog throws off revenue like a well-tended orchard, and still, he walks the shoreline in the morning. Keeps the joints moving, does light work in the studio, because music is therapy. Wealth is numbers, meaning is melodies. He gave back, too, quietly. Benefit concerts for diabetes research in Andy's name. Disaster relief checks without cameras. Animal welfare. You won't find him lecturing from a podium. That's not his way. He'd rather tune a guitar and do the work. You want hidden truths. Here's one. Survival isn't triumph. Sometimes survival is the hardest job a man can take. Barry Gibb is the last witness to a harmony that belonged to 4 voices. Andy's velvet, Maurice's glue, Robin's ghostly quiver, Barry's fire. He carries all of them now, and when Stayin Alive plays at a wedding, or How Deep Is Your Love drifts through a grocery aisle, you're not just hearing pop history. You're hearing a mother's burned hands at a hospital bed. A father's drumsticks in a seaside hotel. 3 brothers singing through petrol fumes. A family breaking and forgiving and breaking again. And a husband who chose his home over his hunger for applause. He once said, "I feel like the last leaf on the tree." That isn't self-pity. That's testimony. Leaves don't boast. They bear witness to the roots below, to the storms endured, to the brothers blown away by winds we can't command. And yet, the leaf still catches light. He still writes. He still sings. He still steps onto a stage, glances left and right out of habit, and hears in the silence what the world once heard. 4 boys in a small room, harmonizing to keep a family alive. So if that voice ever steadied your hands on a lonely night, if those words ever mended something you didn't have language for, remember the cost. Remember the scars that turned into psalms. And when the chorus hits, whether it's To Love Somebody or Night Fever, sing a little louder. Not for the mirror ball, for the kitchen table where coins were counted, for the mother who wouldn't sleep, for the brothers whose chairs are empty, for a man who learned the hardest way that fame fades, families don't, and the only thing worth carrying to the end is love.